Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. As we welcome in Mo Kushner, we want to wish him a refuah shalema and also learn for his grandchild Yorb and Ahuva Bracha Shalamis. Tonight is the yahrzeit of Rabbi Kran's father, so we're going to dedicate the shir Ilui Nishma Shol ben Chaim Zev. Shol ben Chaim Zev. Neshama should have a lichtige Gan Eden. He should be a Meretz Yosher for his family. Halevi. Shol ben Chaim Zev Halevi. Shama should have an aliyah. He should be a Meretz Yosher for his family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. We are dedicated, as always, with the tefillah that all children should get into yeshiva with ease, and everybody should feel wanted. We are holding on Daf Yud Aleph from the Beis, and we are holding 6 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Aleph from the Beis, as we welcome in Mo Kushner, Saba, Harrison Kletzel, Menachem Umansky, Dr. Block, Aaron Swade, Marshall Castle, Irving Fishbaum, Rabbi Kranz, Dr. Guy, Michal, Shalom Fogel, Ben Zion Cohn, Nachman Chapler, Philippe, Eddie Chazan, Moshe Liman, Yitzi Muller, Ilya Shutman, Abe Arbach. Here in Shul, we have with us Gedalia Engel, Reb Kramer, Reb Baruch Ian, Reb Goldstein, and we are holding, again, as I said, 6 lines from the bottom of, and I guess you should throw this out, this is old. 6 lines, thank you. 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Aleph from the Beis. Amar Rav Chisda, HaToifeis l'bal chayv b'makom shechav la'acherim. So this is a case where, as we said, Marshall owes money all over town. And tonight it's been revealed he also owes money to Irving and to Rabbi Kranz and to Menachem Umansky. And Philippe takes money from Marshall to be Zeicha in it for Irving. But you understand that when he's Zeicha in it for Irving, it's detrimental to Rabbi Kran and to Menachem Umansky because they want to get their hands. It's not going to be enough. I'm not sure that they have enough money for what you owe. But anyway, that's what he says. Easy come, easy go. It's not even his card. So anyway, that whether Philippe could be zeichen it for Irving, banu lemachloikis Rebbe Eliezer v'Rabbanan. It is actually a machloikis between Rebbe Eliezer and Rabbanan. Ditnan, misha liked esapeya. You have, let's say, that Eddie is gathering pay. That's the corner of the field. Now, Eddie is not a poor man. What do you think he's traveling all over America for? He's not doing it because he has wanderlust, right? So he's not a poor man, right? V'amar, and he takes the pay and he says, Harizu leploini ani. And he says that this is for Ani Rabinowitz. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says he can acquire it for Ani Rabinowitz. Although, as you understand, when he takes it for Ani Rabinowitz, he's being chav. It's detrimental to the other Aniyim now that won't get it. But when Eddie picks it up, he could be zeichen it for Ani Rabinowitz. The Chachamim say, no, you can't be zeichen it for Ani Rabinowitz because then you're hurting the other people. Rather, Yitnena la'ani anim tzarishin. Eddie has to give it to the first Ani that he meets. Since he picked it up already, he has to give it to the first Ani that he meets. So the Gemara wants to say, so here is Machlokes. The Rebbe Eliezer says, that you can be Zaycha for the Ani, even though it's Chav Lachem, even though it hurts all the other Aniyim. While the Chacham say, if you're Chav Lachem, you can't be Zaycha in it. Amar Ameimer v'Yisem Rapapa, so Ameimer and others say Rapapa says that maybe that's not the Machlokes. Dilma Lohi, as we start the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph on this wonderful Sunday evening. Dilma Lohi, Ad Kan Loikama Rebbe Eliezer Hassam. Rebbe Eliezer says over there that Eddie could be Zaychen it for another Ani. You know why? Because Eddie could be mafkir all his assets and become an Ani himself. And since he could be mafkir all his assets and become an Ani himself, and then he could be Zaychen it for himself, so therefore Migu that he could be Zaychen it for himself, he could be Zaychen it for Ani Rabinowitz. That's what the Gemara says. Perhaps he could renounce the right on all of his property, and since then he would be able to have it for himself. But Irving cannot be, Philippe cannot be Zaychen it for Irving, because Philippe can't take it for himself. Marshall doesn't owe him any money, so he can't be Zaychen it for Irving because he's hurting the other creditors. He's hurting Rabbi Kranz, he's hurting Menachem. Or you could say the other way around. V'ad kan, as we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig, welcome Richard as our 24th Zoomer of the early evening, 4 lines from the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top of Yud Beis Amud Aleph. V'ad kan lo k'amar Rabbanan Hasam, and the Rabbanan only say over there that Eddie cannot take it for Ani Rabinowitz because he darshins the pasuk to read. Now this is a pasuk that we take the words a little bit out of their order. Remember, there's no punctuation in the Torah, and therefore the Torah could be read in different ways. Now it says in the pasuk that leket ksircha loy salaket, you should not take the gleanings, the few blades that fall from the reaper's hand. Rather, la'ani v'lager ta'azay v'isam. Now that's the literal meaning of the pasuk. However, the Rabbanan will dash in the pasuk and read it loy salaket la'ani, that you're not allowed to gather for an ani. So here there's a special reason, ela dichsiv loy salaket la'ani, which means loy salaket loy la'ani. He cannot collect himself for the ani. And that's why. But aval hachalai, but over here perhaps Philippe could take the money for Marshall and be zeichen it for Irving, even though it's kav la'acheren. Now, Rebbe Eliezer, who doesn't darshan this loy salaket la'ani this way, Rebbe Eliezer, hay loy salaket my ovidlay. What does he do with the drasha that it was a Messiah, that there's a drasha of loy salaket la'ani? What does he do? That's coming to tell you mibayle lahazir la'ani al shaloi, that if an ani has a field, a small little field, he cannot take the payer of the field for himself. He has to give it to another ani. And that's what it says, lo salaket la'ani, lahazir la'ani al shaloi, that an ani cannot take the payer of his own field, where it has to leave it for other aniyim. Just getting underway on a beautiful Sunday evening here, and we welcome in Pesach Siegelman. The very next best thing as having Pesach here, it's only second best, because Pesach we like to have you in shul, but if we can't have you in shul, then it's good to have you on Zoom. The Mishnah says, She'im yirtza shaloi lazayin. Now this is interesting. It says that if he wants not to support his Evet Kanani, he doesn't have to give food to his Evet Kanani. But if he wants not to support his wife, he has to support his wife. So now the Gemara is going to say, is that true? You know, the Torah preaches Rachmanis to even our Eved Kanani. Remember, an Eved Kanani is a quasi-type of Jew. He has a quasi-status because he has mitzvahs like a woman. So is it true? The Gemara is a little surprised. Is it true that you could leave him high and dry, work him, and not give him any food? So the Gemara says it seems to be from the Mishnah that way. It seems to be from the Mishnah, Shmat Mino, Yochel Arav Loimer Le'eved, that the master could tell his Eved Kanani, Aseh imi, work, Ve'ini Zancha, but I'm not going to feed you. You'll have to get food from charity. Says the Gemara, no. Hacham Amayaskinan the Amalate say Maisi Odecha L'Mizoynesecha. And instead of working for me, work for your keep. Says the Gemara, well then, you could do that with a woman too. The Kavasa Gabayisha Damalatzi Maisi Odecha B'Mizoynesecha, then there's no difference. You could tell a woman also, take your handiwork for your support. Says, no, there's a difference. Because if the Eved doesn't make enough on his own, the master doesn't have to supplement it. But if the wife doesn't make enough on her own, then the husband has to supplement it. Says the Gemara, Isha Mailai. So then, why is it different by a woman? Says the Gemara, B'deloi Safka, where the woman doesn't make enough. Says the Gemara, Eved Nami B'deloi Safik. Then say also by the servant, if he doesn't make it enough, then the master should have to take care of him. Says the Gemara, Avda Dinoim Kreise Loi Shavya, an Eved that doesn't even make enough to support his own stomach, Lamare Ulamarase, to its master, either a male or female master, Lamai Mitbay, what is he needed? And he doesn't have to add to a servant to supplement if the servant can't feed himself. But if his wife can't feed himself or herself, he does have to supplement it. Because that's what he promises in the Ksuva, V'ate yasva bebeisi, you'll live in my house, or metazna min, and you'll be supported from me. Now, again, the Gemara did not say conclusively, it just says a possibility one way or another, but the Gemara now is going to research to try to figure out, do you have to give your Eved Kanani support, or perhaps you could make him work, and he has to, on his off time, he's on his own resources, he has to beg, or he has to, burn the midnight oil. So Tajma, the Gemara tries to prove it. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. Is it a little hot in here, or it's my? I
think we could lower the thermostat. If you want.
What do you think? What do you think? Huh?
It's a little stuffy.
That's what I thought. You're not arguing, right?
I never argue when someone wants to lower the thermostat.
Yeah.
I never argue. I come from the frozen, Canada, so.
Okay.
Rabbi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we learn the Lil Nishmas, my mother, Chaya Leah Bas Zachariah, please?
It's a yard site?
Yes.
So we learn Stephen's mother, Chaya Leah Bas Zachariah.
Yes.
Chaya Leah Bas Zachariah, a neshama should have a great aliyah. She should be a Melitzis Yosher for her family, for all of us, and all of Klal Yisrael. By the way, for those that did not get the note, with the help of Hashem, we're back in the saddle. I want to thank Hashem, if you remember, before Yom Tov, I really wasn't feeling well, and we went a period without a chok. There will be a chok tonight, Baruch Hashem, and also I want to say that since I already did Nasa Ba'aloischa, and I finished Shlach, I put up today on YouTube. It's of course already on Torah Anytime and on Kalaloshin, but I put on YouTube the chok of today of Nasa Day 1, and I will be putting up on YouTube every day as I have it the chok of Nasa 2 and Nasa 3 and Nasa 4. Besides, I already put up almost 40 shiurim on YouTube for those people that find it easier to learn with YouTube.
Which chak are we doing tonight?
We're doing shlach number 6.
Okay.
Shlach number 6. So Tajma, Eved shegala la'orei miklat. An Eved killed somebody b'shoigeg. So since he has all the mitzvahs of a woman, so since he killed somebody unwittingly, he's exiled to one of the city of refuges of the Levium. Ein rabbi chayev lazaynai. His master doesn't have to support him. V'loy ayda, not only that, ela shemaisi yodav l'rabbi. Not only doesn't he have to support him, but any work that he does over there, he has to send to his master. Oh, so that's pretty clear that the master could make him work and not support him. Shmamina. The Rav could say to the servant, "Asei work for me, ve'eni zancha, and I'm not going to support you." Says the Gemara, no. And here it's talking about the where he said, "Look, you could keep your work, and that will be your pay." In other words, where you go into the city of exile, you're not with me anyway, so work for your own keep. Says the Gemara, so if he says work for his own keep, then what does it mean that the master gets his salary? He told him he could work for his keep. So what does it mean that the master gets his salary? Lahadafa. Oh, that means if the slave makes one day $130 and he eats for $90, he eats and his room and board and everything equals $90, so he has to give the $40 to the master. So the Gemara says, Hadafa Pshita, so the surplus, of course he has to give to the master. Says the Gemara, I might think, Mao Desema Kema Dechilesle, that if he has a dry day, that nobody hires him. Lo Yavle, the Adon doesn't give him any money. So ki isle nami loy lishko minei. I might think that he should have to allow the slave to build a nest egg, and even if he has a surplus, he should keep it for days that he's not going to get work. Kamash malon. So the Gemara says, well, then that seems to be a situation whether he's in an Orei Miklat or whether he's at home, because at home also the master could say, don't work and keep your food, and if there's extra, the master gets it. So, Maishna Orei Miklat, what's the Chiddush of the Orei Miklat? The Chiddush is Solkadaita Chamina. Since it says in the Pasuk that you send him to the Orei Miklat V'chai, and you keep him alive, that's what it says. V'nos alachas mina Orem el. He flees to one of these cities V'chai, and you make sure that he lives. I might think that you should ensure that he should be able to live, and maybe he does get to keep the surplus for a dry day. Kamash Malan says the Gemara, but wait a second. But a woman that's exiled to miklat balachayim b'menazoniseh, the husband has to support her. That seems to imply that it's talking about where he doesn't tell her to work for her keep. Michlal dalayamala baila, because if the husband says keep your salary, amay chayiv. And since the sefer is talking about where you didn't tell her to keep her handiwork, reishinami dalayamala, then the reish must be also where you didn't tell the slave to keep his handiwork. Says no. La'olam da'amalei, where he told the wife to keep her handiwork. But there, if she doesn't make enough, then he has to take care of her. The isha, but the loisapka, it's talking about where she doesn't make enough. And if it doesn't make enough, then the husband has to support her. Says the Gemara, if he says to her, keep your handiwork, Rashi, he's allowed to mechlal the reisha the loyamala. The reisha is talking about where he didn't say it to her. Hachi kamer, the immaspekes, if she makes if she makes enough. If she makes enough, and he says, keep it for your mezainis, Rashi. So the Gemara says, well, maspekas, if she makes enough, Maila Meimer, what's the chiddush? So of course it's a wash. He tells her, keep it for your keep, and it's enough, so why not? I might think that when she's in an Arei Miklat, he's not allowed to tell her work instead of me supporting you. Because at home, where people know her, she could get orders to the house, because everybody knows her. And she could get orders to the house, and she could knit in the house, and she's able to preserve her dignity. But in the Arei Miklat, where people don't know her, she's going to have to go out and drum up business. I might think he can't demand that of her. The dignity of a Jewish woman is in the home. And therefore, since the dignity of a Jewish woman is in the home, when she's in the Arei Miklat and she's not known, so she's going to have to go out and drum up business, maybe he can't demand that of her. Kamash Malan, that he could still tell her, you work and I'm not going to support you. This, by the way, is a almost forgotten idea of Kol Kvuda Bas Melech Panima. But there was a dignity of a woman that she didn't go out just among people and go into the rough marketplace where she would have to be confronted by people that will not treat her with the dignity due to a woman and the privacy due to a woman.
Is it mashma that this daf in the Arei Miklat, that there was a problem for going out not on her own turf? There wouldn't be a problem.
No, not because when she's on her own turf, she doesn't need to go out.
Why?
Because people know her. So the Gemara says, let's again, this question, Gemara didn't resolve this question yet. This question of whether a owner of an Eved Kanani could stiff him and say, work for me and I'm not supporting you. Let's say that this is a machlokes tanoim, lema ketanoi. Reb Shimon Gamliel leimer yochel Eved leimer l'rabbi, a servant could tell his master, b'shnei batzayres, during a time of famine, Oy parneseni, either give me food, oy haitzieni lecheres, or free me. The Chachamim say, harishus b'yad rabbi, the master could insist that he works, even though he doesn't provide him food. So it must be, my lab b'hakamifligi. The Marsavar, one holds, yachal, that he could tell him, work for me even though I'm not supporting you. Or Marsavar ain't a yachal, he can't. So he says, listen, either support me or free me, because you can't tell me to work and not support me. It shouldn't be either support me or free me. Rather, either support me, or let me work for my keep. It shouldn't be free me. It should be either free me or let me work for my keep. Either support me or let me work for my keep. And furthermore, why is this only if the machlokes is whether the master is allowed to tell him, work for me and I won't support you, then it's not only in a time of famine. And here we're talking about it's where he tells him, work for your keep. But during a time of famine, he's not able, the food is very expensive, He's not able to afford to buy the food. He's not making enough. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says he could tell the master, look, I'm going to have to beg. So either you give me food or free me, because when you free me, then people will have Rahmanis on me because I'll be a regular Jew and they'll take care of me. So Reb Shimon Gamliel Sava, Oy Parnaseini, either support me, Oy Hoitzieni Lecheris, or free me because then I'll be a regular Ben Chayrin, I'll be a regular Jew, Ki Eichi Dechazal Yinshe, so people will see me, or Merachmin Alai, and they'll have mercy on me. Rabbanan say, no, Jews know that an Eved has mitzvahs like a woman, and it's a mitzvah to support him. So man the Merachim Abnei Chari, somebody has Rachmanis on a Yid, Eved Nami Rechume Merachim. So it's no taina to free me. You're going to have to take tzedakah. People that will give tzedakah will also give tzedakah to Eved Kanani because they know that he has mitzvahs like a woman. Still no resolution. 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. As we chug along, and note, Rabbi say, we just started Gittin and we're already on Daf Yud Beis. It's really the power of learning every day is such a power. Before we know it, we're going to be finishing Seder Nashim. It's really quite remarkable. Tajma, the Amar Rav says, Hamaktish Yedei Avdoi. Here, let's see, who would do such a thing? Marshall. Marshall has a slave, Tony, and Marshall dedicates his slave's handiwork to Hegdish. So Hamaktish Yedei Avdoi, and of course, not only does Marshall do that, the great tzaddik, he also doesn't give Tony any food. So he's makdish his handiwork, and he doesn't give him any food, right? That's why they did not give him the Boy Scout Award of America. They didn't. They passed him up for that.
The devil made me do it.
Yeah, right. On the other hand, the devil did give him several awards. Shelley told me he was in his study and he has several awards from the devil. I think the devil actually sent him a bottle of bourbon, Red Devil or something.
A case of bourbon. What are you talking about?
Anyway, so Tajma, Damarav, Hamakdish Yedei Avdai. So Marshall dedicates the handiwork of his poor, sad, sorry, unlucky slave Tony. So Osa Eved, the Eved only has one Eitzah. What he does is loive, he looks for a nice guy, Aaron Swade, and he borrows from Aaron Swade money to eat. Osa Eved loive v'oichel, v'ose upareya. And then he works, and he works for Aaron, and Aaron can listen to this. Aaron can take his handiwork as pay. Why? Because Aaron takes it in increments of less than a pruta. Because it doesn't become hektish until it accrues to a pruta. So Aaron gets his collection in increments of less than a pruta before it becomes hektish. That's what poor Tony has to resort to. And Aaron knows. He knows what it means to work for Marshall, so he's willing to be kind-hearted. So, Oisa Eved Loiva v'Oichel v'Oisa Pareya. Now, but how can Marshall do this? If Marshall has to support him, so then if he says his handiwork should be Hegdish, so then he should have to support him. For the fact that he doesn't have to support him, work for me, and that's how he's able to dedicate it to Hektish, but I don't have to support you. Says, no, it's talking about where Marshall feeds him. He's not that cruel. Look at surprise on everybody's faces. He's not that cruel. Marshall gives him food. Oh, but if Marshall gives him food, then what's the problem? Why does he have to work for why do you have to take a loan for Aaron? If so, asks Gemara, Lamai, for what purpose? Loiva v'eichel, says the Gemara, Lahadafa. He needs more. Look, Marshall. Marshall gives him a bowl of cereal in the morning, a slab of cream cheese and bread for lunch, and a tiny little bologna sandwich in the night. And the poor guy is working his head off, and by the end of the night, he's starved. Right? So says the Gemara, he needs to work for the extra. Says the Gemara, but v'lei malei hektish should be able to tell him, ad hashta sagilach b'loi hadafa, until now, you didn't need any extras. You should do without any extras. In other words, why should we be able to arrange this if he was able to exist without extras? Says the Gemara, no, Hektish is happy for this arrangement. Because since all his work is going to Hektish, Hektish is happy that he should get, a donut and a coffee and maybe even a slab of kokosh in the night, maybe even a shot of bourbon in the night, so that he should be able to work the whole day. Says the Gemara, Hektish gufa nechelei ki echad lishmach avdei, that he should be able to work good. Now, I gave you the scoop how he could work for Aaron and pay him. The problem is, it really doesn't make sense. How can he pay? His handiwork is Hektish. How can he pay Aaron with his handiwork? Oiso Parei asking Gemara, Kama Kadishle, whatever he makes belongs to Hektish. How can he give it to Aaron? Says the Gemara, but Pachas Meshava Pruta, because Aaron takes it in increments of less than a pruta before it becomes the value of a pruta and goes to Hektish. Says the Gemara, Hachi Nami Mistavra. Now the Gemara is still looking for a proof that you could tell your Eved, work for me, and I'm not going to pay you. So the Gemara says, Hachi Nami Mistavra. The Amar Rav Hamaktish Yidei Avdai, also Eved, that slave, Oisa v'oich. That slave could work and eat. The Eloi Avda, because if he doesn't work for himself, man polachlei, who's going to work for him? Says the Gemara, one second. What did I just say? I just said the opposite. I just said that it's reasonable to say that you could tell your Eved to work and not pay. Just the opposite. Hakanami Mistava Rashi says the Mamaloi Mizainis Kamer. It's talking about where the Hakanami Mistavra over here means that it's talking about where Marshall is paying him for his work. That's the Hakanami Mistavra. And we'll see that it will imply that Marshall cannot tell him to work and not pay him. But rather it's talking about where Marshall is giving him food. Damarav, Hamaktish Yedei Avdai, if your if you say again, if he sanctifies the handiwork of his eved, oisa eved, oisa va'eichel, he could work and get food. Di'ilai avda, because if he doesn't, man polachlei, who's going to work for him? Now, Hektish doesn't give the food to him, right? So if he doesn't take care of him, who's going to give him food? So, Iyamit bishleima hach b'mala. So here we're saying a different halacha. Earlier we say that he has to be loiva v'eichel. Here we say that he could keep the food himself. He doesn't have to borrow from anyone. So it's a stira. Again, earlier we learned that he doesn't get to keep the food. He has to borrow money from Aaron and then work to pay Aaron, and Aaron collects it in increments before it becomes hektish. Here it says that he could work and use that money to go to the grocery. Right? So what's going on over here? Again, if Marshall sanctifies the handiwork of the Eved, he could go, make money, and then go to ShopRite and buy food. Because if he doesn't work for himself, man polachlei, who's going to take care of him? Hektish is not taking care of him. So, that the first case of the Mishnah, the first case was talking about where Marshall was supporting him. Ve'eino yochel, and it's talking about that the master cannot tell him that I'm not gonna have you work and not support you. So Marshall was giving him support. So since Marshall was giving him support, so then his handiwork went to hektish, and therefore he had to resort for extras for the snack in the night. He had to borrow money from Aaron. The second case is Marshall is not giving him mezainis. If Marshall is not giving him mezainis, then he can't tell him to work, because he can't say work and I'm not going to give you mezainis. So then, since he can't tell him to work, so therefore he could work for. Therefore, Marshall had no right to dedicate his handiwork, because it's not Marshall's. He can't tell him to work if he's not going to support it, and therefore he could work for himself, shopper. If it's talking about where Marshall is not supporting him, v'yochel, and he's allowed to tell him, don't work, I'm not going to support you. Di'iloi of the man polachlei, because if he doesn't work, who's going to support him? Says, well, what do you mean who's going to support him? That's not a taina. Who's going to support him? Man debay niflechei. He's going to have to throw himself on charity. What kind of a statement is that? In other words, if we're going to say that the halacha is that Marshall could say, Eini nizainis, and you have to work for me, so then Marshall could be makdish it. And what do you mean if he doesn't work, who's going to support him? His work doesn't belong to him. Who's going to support him? He's going to have to beg. Elalav shmamina, it must be like we said, Eino yachol. Marshall cannot tell him that work, and I'm not going to support you. Therefore, in the first case, it was talking about where he supported him. And therefore, since he supported him, Marshall could dedicate his handiwork. And once he dedicates his handiwork, the only way he could get extras is from borrowing it from Aaron. But in the second part, where Marshall tells him that I'm not going to support you, if he says I'm not going to support you, so then Marshall has no right to dedicate his handiwork because it belongs to the Eved since he's not supporting him, and therefore he could work for himself. Shma mina. So it's a clear raya that the halacha is that Marshall cannot tell his Eved, work for me and I'm not going to support you. Okay? That's where we're holding now. Any questions on this? That was a little bit tricky. Now, Tajma, the Gemara is not finished. Tajma, Akiteya yad avdoi shel chaveroi. If let's say Dr. Block has an Eved, and Marshall cuts off his hand. I needed to be very quick on my feet over there. I had to give the Eved to somebody else. So because you could see Marshall prancing around with his machete after four cups of bourbon and poured.
Wouldn't just be his hand I'd cut off,
You were aiming for his head. Thank God that you drank the 4 cups of bourbon.
That machete swings very low and hard.
So anyway, so Baruch is very happy that you're here, Marshall. So anyway, so Tajman, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Akiteya yad avdoi shel chaveroi. If Marshall cuts off the hand of Dr. Block's Eved, Noisin shiftoi urufu asay l'rabbi, Marshall has to give the unemployment and the medical to Dr. Block. V'oisa Eved, and that servant is nizayin min tzedakah, gets supported from charity. So the Gemara says, Shmami no yochel Rav loyma le'eved asay miveini zancha. It seems to be that the Rav could say, work for me, and I'm not going to support you, because here he's getting the compensation for his work. He's getting the compensation, and yet he doesn't have to support him. He asks for tzedakah. Says, no. Dr. Black is supporting the Eved while he's recuperating. Says, now what does he have to get from tzedakah? It means that if he needs extra because he's not feeling well, Dr. Black doesn't have to give that. It comes from tzedakah. Says Gemara, he should get support, not it's extra parnasa, not nizain. If Dr. Black is giving him the essentials. Elalav shmami no yochel. From the fact that it says nizain, it seems to be from here that Dr. Black could say, I'm getting the unemployment, I don't have to support him. And here, where the Eved can't support himself, because Nebuch Marshall did a job on him, so he has to collect from tzedakah. Shmamina. So here we have now contrary implication here that the contrary implication from over here that a master can tell the Eved to that work for me because he's getting the unemployment and I'm not going to support you. Right? So this is an interesting contradictory implications. It becomes a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, here we got a lot of problems over here. First of all, it says, Amar Mar noisin shiftoi urefuasai l'rabbi. We give the unemployment and the medical to Dr. Block. What do you mean? Don't we give the medical to the slave? Got to get him healthy. Why is it going to Dr. Block? So the Gemara says, Shiftei Pshita. The unemployment, of course, that goes to Dr. Black. That's not a Kiddush. It's his slave. Says Gemara, Refu Asa Yitzrichalei. It means that the medicine goes to Dr. Black. So the Gemara says, why? Refu Asa Didei. The medical goes to the slave. You got to get him better. The Bayitziyebe. You have to cure him. You have to heal him. That's what it's for. What does it mean that goes to Dr. Black? That he can use it for another patient? Says, no, listen to this. Listen, it's not easy to be a slave. Here we're talking about where the normal remedy for this is to put on an ointment for 5 days. But there's a very strong ointment that stings and it'll work in 3 days. So Dr. Black could give him the 3 days, even though the poor Tony is screaming his head off, and he pockets the 2 days of the expensive medicine. That's pshat, that he gets the medical. Says, in other words, they made Marshall pay for 5 days of treatment. But since Dr. Black is a sore bones himself, he's a doc himself, he makes a sharp medicine, which costs the same, and it heals him in 3 days, although he's screaming his head off. So now the same at Saradi Dayu, since the Eved struggled with the pain, he should keep the extra money for the 2 days. Kamash Milan, no, that extra money for the 2 days goes to Dr. Black. Tanya. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said, now if you remember, Rameir was of the opinion in our Mishnah, let's just go back to the Mishnah for a second. We're almost finished, by the way. Pretty hard daf. Rameir was of the opinion that if the husband sends with Shelley a get to a woman, or a writ of emancipation, a get shikhr to a slave, Rameir says that Shelley cannot be zeicha in it for either of them. So even for the slave, Rav Meir holds it's considered detrimental. While the Chacham say no, he could be zeicha for the slave, because to get him his freedom, that is always a zuchus. So Tanya, Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amarno Loila Meir, we said to Meir, because he was a colleague, they didn't address him as Rebbe Meir, Amarnu Loila Meir, V'aloi zechusu le'eved, why can't Shelley be zeichen it? It's a schus for the eved that he goes free. Sheyoytze mitachas yidei rabbi lecheris, he goes from his master free. Amalana Rameir said chayvahu, it's detrimental. Why? Shema ya eved kayin, because if he was an eved kayin, he's able to eat truma. And now if he's freed, he's not able to eat truma anymore. Shema ya eved kayin paisay minat truma. So the Gemara says, Amar Nulai, we said to him, V'aloi ma im yirtza shaloi lezaynai v'shaloi lefarnesai rashai. If he wants to, he doesn't have to support him. He doesn't have to feed him. He doesn't have to clothe him. So therefore, then he won't gain anything, even if he's an eved of a kayin. And therefore, it should be his benefit to be freed, Rashai. So the Gemara says no. Because if he's the eved of a kayin, he could run away and then get money from Kohanim for Truma, or buy Truma that's cheaper than other food. Amarnu la'ma ilu eved kayin shebarach Ve'eshish kayin shemarda al baila, the servant of a kayin that runs away, or a wife of a kayin that rebels against her husband, haloi oichlin b'truma, they'd both be able to eat truma. But v'zei no oichel, but this one will not be able to eat in the event that he runs away, if you're going to accept the get for him, because then if you accept the get shikhr for him, he's not the kinyan kaspa of a kohen anymore, and he won't be able to eat truma. Says the Gemara, Avol isha chayvula, but the wife you can't accept because it's detrimental to her. Why? She came psalam in truma. It disqualifies her from truma if she's married to a kohen, or mafsida min mezainis, and causes her to lose mezainis. So the Gemara says, what's the give and take over here? Maika amrulei, what did Rebbe Elazar say to Rameir? Or Maika mahadrulei, and what did Rameir retort? So the Gemara tells us the give and take over here. Hachi karmelu, hashaftuni ala mezainis. You proved me about the mezainis, that a slave will lose his mezainis when he is freed. You answered me about the mezainis that it's not a loss that he loses it when he's freed, because the master could say, I'm not giving you mezainis. So you answered me about that, and that's why that it's not a chayv, it's not detrimental, because even though the master supports him, he doesn't have to support him. He could say, work and I'm not going to support you. But matishivuni ala truma, what you're going to ask me about truma? By accepting the get shikhr, you're causing him to lose his right of eating truma. The chi temru. And maybe you'll say, oh, that's not a cheshbon, because the master could throw him to get shikhr, and then he'll lose his right to eat truma anyway. He could say, get out of here. The chi temru iboy zarek legita apostle. The master could throw the get shikhr at him at any time and deprive of him of it anyway. Says the Gemara, that's not a cheshbon. It's not a cheshbon, because the Eved could run away, and then he won't be able to free him. Ma'ilu Eved kain shebarach, he could run away. Ve'eshes kain shemorda al bala, and the wife of a kain that rebels on her husband, haloi oichlin b'truma, they could eat truma, but now that you accepted to get shikhr on his behalf, he won't be able to eat truma anymore. V'zeh no oichel. So that's why Rameir says, I hold that Shelley cannot accept a get shikhr for the Eved kain, because by doing that, it deprives him of a means of having truma. He could always run away. That way the Adon can't free him, and he'll always be able to pick up truma. It's cheaper to get truma, because Kohanim sell truma for a pittance, because it can't be eaten by anybody else. Says the Gemara. So Shaper Kamalu, Rameir had a good retort to the Rabbanon. Says, Amarava, Hainu de Kamahadrele b'masnisan. That's what they answer him in the Mishnah. Mipneishu kinyanai. No. What do you mean? This Eved is at the mercy of his master. Even if he runs away, the master could go ahead and say, Dr. Block could say, I'm going to sell you to Marshall. He'll take $4 from Marshall and sell him to him. He doesn't have to be around. And Marshall's not a kohen, and he's going to lose it anyway. He's his property. He could take 4 zuz from any Tom, Dick, and Harry. He could take 4 zuz from Marshall, and upasale, and he could disqualify him kol echad yisei, wherever he is. So basically, what the Gemara is, just to give you a summation of what the Gemara is saying over here, the Gemara is saying that according to Reb Meir, in the instance of an Eved, when the master sends the get shikra with a shliach to Tony, he can't be zeichen it for Tony, where Tony was the Eved of a Kayin, because it's not a schus for him. It could be a chay for him, because till now he's able to eat truma, and even though it's true that Marshall could throw him a get shikra, he could run away. And then according to a mayor, he's out of Marshall's hands. And he'll be able to live on truma much easier. And therefore it's not a schus for him to take a get shikra and strip him of being the kinyan kaspe of a kayin. The Rabbanan counter and say, Dr. Black doesn't need the Eved to be around to strip him of being the Eved of a kayin. Wherever he is, he could make a transaction and sell him to Marshall, who's not a kayin, and strip him of the right of being Eved kayin and eating truma, and therefore there's no schus left to remain the Eved of a kayin. It's rather better for him to acquire his freedom, and therefore he holds that he could be zeiche in it. The Rabbanan hold you could be zeiche in the get shikra on behalf of Tony, and it's not considered a chayv. Whoa. Any questions? Okay, that was a little bit of a difficult piece of Gemara.
I have a question.
Yes.
If he goes ahead, the hypothetical situation, and without Tony knowing that he lost his right to eat the truma, then he's got a tremendous michshol. The voice doesn't go out that he would, or maybe there is a call that comes out that he'll hear it.
The answer is if the Eved runs away, he wouldn't be able to eat truma until he makes sure that his master did not sell him.
No.
He shouldn't be running away.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Is it possible to be paid less than a pruta? I thought the pruta was the smallest denomination.
He could take increments of work. In other words, he tells him, Aaron says, clean out the bottom of my dresser and please dust my hat. And each of those acts could be incrementally less than. Don't worry, Aaron is thinking the whole night of jobs for Tony. Okay, we're going to learn. We're going to learn the Chok now. Rabbi say I did the Mishnah Yomis already, so just stay with me a minute. Wow, going into a Chok after this is not so easy.